We are a little bit off time, but I'd like to invite Ofer Schreiber, Senior Partner and Head of the Israeli Office at YL Ventures, and his panel.
So thank you, Nancy, for the intro, and thank you, Cyber Week, for hosting us. Here is an interesting data point for the audience. From all the Israeli cybersecurity companies that were founded over the past year, more than 1/3 were founded by Israeli serial entrepreneurs, second-timers, etc., experienced founders. I think that says a lot, about the opportunities that entrepreneurs are finding in our industry and the ability to build big and ambitious companies. It also says a lot about the robustness of the Israeli ecosystem and the continued growth and evolvement of our industry. So I am very happy to share the stage today with four amazing founders who've built multiple companies throughout the years and are actively involved in our industry as active entrepreneurs and also as angel investors and advisors. And so we have a pretty broad perspective here in the stage. So let's start with a quick round of introductions and then we'll dive into a few questions I have.
Hi everyone, good afternoon, almost. Zohar Alon, founder of Dome 9 Security, early employee at Checkpoint, and doing cyber for most of my life, more than half of my life.
Hi, Ohad Bobrov. I'm also doing cyber for most of my life now. I founded Raccoon, which was acquired by Checkpoint, and later I founded Talon, which was acquired by Palo Alto.
Hi everyone, I'm Ribenzaft. I was the co-founder of Epsagon. It was partially cyber, not exactly, so I'm the black sheep in the room.
You're still welcome.
Yeah, I'm still welcome. I'm doing angel investing, mostly in cybersecurity.
Hi everybody, I'm Dima Stopel. I co-founded Twistlock, and then we sold it to Palo Alto Networks, and now we co-founded the company called Gutsy.
So obviously we have a lot of experience, a lot of accumulated years. I think 14 years of founding companies. Thank you, Zohar, for extending this time frame. Obviously the industry has changed and evolved quite a lot from the days that all of you started your first company. So my first question is, what are the main differences in starting a company today versus several years ago? Are the challenges different or pretty much the same? Is it easier to start startups these days, or what's your perspective?
Okay, so I founded my previous startup around 12 years ago, and I can tell you it was a very, very different world. I remember that we went to VCs and everyone told us, cyber is not interesting, why would anyone invest in that? And I think that today the industry is much, much better. Of course, it's much more crowded, but I do think that actually a lot of it is because of the VCs. The opportunity to work with VCs, with cyber VCs in Israel, is something that you don't have almost anywhere else in the world, and it's a crazy benefit, and it provides you a lot of things. So I think it's easier. I think it's still hard, to start a startup, and it's much more crowded now, and so it's much harder to create differentiation.
I'd say maybe that it's a double-edged sword. As you mentioned, on one side there is much more education on cybersecurity, much more VCs, much more active investments, but on the same time it's getting really crowded, it's getting really hard to raise above the noise, and especially to build something big, which everything becomes like a very niche and small category.
I think we have a playbook now. There's a thanks to the VCs over the last 10 years, we have almost like a playbook on how to set up a cyber company, how to fund it in the early days, how do we get to the first $1 million of ARR, how do we expand to the US. You don't need to invent too much. Remember, Checkpoint was started 30 years ago. There was no one to copy from. There were not even experts in the crowd that you could ask. And now I think, the copy-paste element of using the collective knowledge coming from VCs, VCs that are collaborating more than just on just one company. And the crowdedness, you know, I look at the DSPM market, and we have 8 Israeli players that are DSPM companies. Of them, 5 have exited successfully, and the other
6 maybe, no?
6 maybe
Eureka
now, yeah.
now.
And 2 others, one has raised several hundreds of millions of dollars in a unicorn valuation, and the other one is also not doing too bad. And if that's the cost of being crowded, then, you know, I think we have the power, maybe even, you know, changing awareness, creating, you know, things that we don't do so well in the international level, in explaining ourselves and what we do here in the Middle East, but maybe in setting up vectors or verticals in the cyber industry, we're doing a better job.
So let's talk specifically about the experience of founding your second company or third. Start with the easier question. What is easier in starting your second company? Maybe we'll start with you, Dima.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's very easy to answer. It's much easier to raise money. But everything else is, at least in my opinion, is hard, exactly the same. Like especially finding and sharpening and validating your product market fit, which is, in my opinion, is the bread and butter of every startup, is still hard.
So, of course, I agree that raising money is much, much easier on the second time. And I agree that product market fit is always very, very hard. But I do think that in other regards, there are lots of benefits. So you can bring usually much stronger team. You have much more access, and you have access to people and companies in the US. You have access to people here. Of course, it's also another opportunity, you know, to do new mistakes, and it's not easy. But I think that it's still easier. Maybe one downside is that the expectation and the bar that you need to reach is much higher. And this is actually you know, because you are starting with much more money, with much higher valuation, so the bar is much higher than it used to be on your first startup.
So Ran and Zohar, the opposite question: what is harder when you're starting your second company?
Maybe as Ohad mentioned, the expectations are much higher. You raise more money, you're expected to grow much faster, which is not always easy, because as you mentioned, the challenge to get into product market fit or the first $1 million in revenue is still hard. There is no magic to make it happen. And the expectations is to make it much faster, because you know, if a usual first-timers company takes, I don't know, 2 years or 18 months to get $2 million in revenue, now you're expected to do this in less than a year. So the challenge is still similar, but the expectations are much higher. So you need to deliver much faster. You have more money, but you still need to do your best.
You know, the 0 to 1 is, I think, that the most difficult, even if especially if you're a second timer, because you have this question mark whether you'll get there or not. Are you building something that somebody needs? And I think, you know, these guys were extremely brave in setting up a new segment as second timers. Gutsy are also doing that. That's a very bold move, because you have no reassurances. You know the game, you know the buyers, the potential, you have more money. Sometimes you can even reiterate and maybe even pivot dramatically, like the founders of Torque and what they did with their first startup. So I think that, you know, raising more money gives you. I would have never survived the 3 years or 4 years it took Dome9 to get to $1 million in today's VC atmosphere. Not because the investors are bad, it's because the expectations are definitely different. But we see that investing now in second timers is, on the flip side, is something that VCs want more, even private investors want more, because there's no cap to where they can go, because they'll not sell their company for $100 million again.
You just remind me of something, and it's a difference. Like when you start the first startup, everybody tells you that your ideas are stupid. So you need to change fast. You validate your ideas much harder. For the second time, everybody tells you that every idea that you say is very good. So you say, well, let's try it. So I mean, Yeah.
You mean mostly investors, right? I feel like I'm. Yeah. So let's continue the conversation about investors, and you mentioned it several times already. It's easier to raise capital when you're a repeating founder, and it's no secret that there's a clear differentiation between the seed rounds of first timers and the seed rounds of second timers, which tend to be much larger, in higher valuations, bigger checks from folks like me and others. And let's ask a real question. Do you think it's justified from an investor's perspective?
I'll say two answers. No, because if you made it the first time, you can potentially made it the second time. It's hard. However, some second timers are trying to target incumbents displacement play. And to make it happen, you need much more budget and potentially a little more time to target some, I don't know, incumbent in the identity ecosystem or cloud or any other domain. So for that, you need more money. $5 million, it's a lot of money in Israel, but potentially for that, you need 10 or 15 million to get you to something more meaningful, because the MVP that you're usually targeting as a first timer, it's not the same MVP as a second timer if you're trying to displace something big. And the reason most second timers are going to that, going to target something big domain, usually incumbents, and if not, it should be something big enough, and then you need to deliver with more R&D, more product, more marketing to get it up and running.
So actually, I think it's not justifiable. I think that it's financially, I think it's not I'm not sure that it's always it's going to be the best investment. I do think that there is a market, and eventually it's much easier for the founders to build a company. I think that it's with more money, because you have much more for doing mistakes, much more room for maneuver. And I think this is like everything in free economy. It's you should get what you can.
No, I think that it's actually much more efficient on the CEO time. When you raise a $25 million seed round, you're essentially saying, instead of raising an 8 or even a $10 million seed round, and 4 months into it you start to think about your A round, you're compressing time. You're saying you're buying yourself either more runway or more power to execute in a more condensed time. But we saw it with the scope, we saw it with you guys, and we saw it even with you guys. You raised because you probably didn't use a lot of the money you raised, and the reason was that you didn't need to bother with that from a certain point. And this is very efficient on the CEO time, so you can be out there speaking and sending the message of why is the company building amazing things. Most of my time as a CEO was spent on money raising. I envy the guys that for example, we have our good friend from the Scope who raised 50-something million of seed and A and maybe part of the B together, and he's not doing funding now, and the company is like 18 months old now, and that's a huge benefit on the CEO time. So
ambitious entrepreneurs, whether they're first timers or second timers, they want to build big companies. And I wanted to ask you, which areas within cybersecurity you think can really sustain a big vendor? Unicorn is kind of like a weird word to say, but let's call it. Where do you see an opportunity within cybersecurity to build a company that sells $100 million in ARR?
If I had one, I would just do it myself,
Obviously, it's us. Well, but anyway, the general answer is, like, in my opinion, is that the gazillion of products in the security space, I mean, it was a problem, but now it became even a bigger problem. So I think making an order in all these products and how people use them and so on, I think it's a good challenge.
We see. I want to do an identity company, a secure identity company, not the so-called secure that we have now. There's maybe a room for another firewall company. You know, there hasn't been innovation there since 2005, where Palo Alto Network was born. I'm not, no, DLP is an ugly market. I just invested in one. No offense to anyone, but there is, we can do whatever we want. We can replace incumbents. We can go after, you know, AGI security. It's better than AI security. It's, you know, nobody will be able to test your product for the next 2 years, but you can talk about it. We can do quantum security. We can do whatever we want. We really need to just have some passion, some drive, something from your heart or your soul in it, and you can do it. We will find, you know, we'll pivot around and find it, especially if this is your second time around.
All right, so let's switch gears to some lessons learned and tips for the entrepreneurs in the audience. Cybersecurity is a super crowded space. We already know that. What are your tips to founders who really want to differentiate their products in a highly competitive environment?
I'll share maybe a more generic tip for at least early stage founders, first timers, to bring strong leadership team, especially on the areas of marketing and sales, which will help craft how you differentiate yourself, how do you position yourself in the ecosystem. Usually first timers, mostly in Israel, are very technical. They don't have the knowledge nor the experience to conduct such activities, and bringing the right team, very strong leadership team, can help them do this right on the first time or even the second time and not on the 10th time.
So I think that, I think it's a surprise, but I think that eventually the market is crowded and it's much harder, no matter actually what you do. But I do think that specifically initially, I do believe that focus and listening to the customer, but also being very focused about why the customer is going to buy your product is super important. I think that it's very easy, you know, to have lots of nice things that eventually, you know, the customer will like, but eventually, you know, specifically initially, customers buy product for very few crucial needs, and identify that and deliver that. I think this is it's sometimes differentiate between different companies in the same category.
Just another direction is, in our case, it just happened naturally, because the ideas that we chose were in the blue ocean kind of ideas, so naturally they were different, and it's not always the right direction. I mean, it has some pros and cons, but I mean, you can just choose a different idea.
Dima, you mentioned Blue Ocean, and Ran, you mentioned going after incumbents. It's a very different dynamics, right? Entering a existing category or trying to invent a new category. Would you say that one of them is more relevant for first, the other makes more sense for an experienced team, or you don't see any correlation?
In my opinion, I think it's important to go what you believe in, and this is the secondary thing that you need to think about.
So I think that actually you are right that going on a completely new category does take a bit more time and much more education. So I don't think that any of them is easy. So I don't think that going on the large companies it's easy. But still, I think that if you actually want to create a completely new category like what you are doing, I think that it's something that you know, it takes time, it takes money. So it is easier, you know, for a second timer to do it than a first timer.
All right. Let's talk about go-to-market. Kind of traditionally, where Israeli founders are lacking. I think it's definitely improving over time, partly because of the continued involvement of experienced entrepreneurs who've done it in the past. Kind of a general advice from your experience about how to build a go-to-market team, how to do it effectively, and how to avoid so many pitfalls that we've seen throughout the years.
So one of the things I saw recently is companies that are hiring teams, not just hire the lead and he will then slowly build his team or bring his people with him. As part of the negotiation, you actually snatch a team of 4 or 3 leadership plus people who are already doing the job, usually from a company that was acquired a year or 2 ago, and you know you can get the talent over. That's the easiest target. And instead of making mistakes serially, which is sometimes we do in hiring of, exec and leadership team and go to market, you rather make the mistakes parallelly, because then you can fix them faster. Instead of making 2 right after the other, you do 3 at the same time, and then you can actually fix it. And it's not funny. This is a very critical time that you can save by doing this trial and error quicker than you think you should. And if you can do it collectively, that's even better.
I'd say that I have a generic answer, which is using advisors that are coming specifically from the cybersecurity domains. I know Zohar is involved with many companies, and I'm pretty sure you're helping them address go-to-market issues, some very small, some are very big. It can be a contract size or which conference to go to or sponsor, things that can help avoid tons of mistakes in the early days. So using one or a few, either in your cap table or as an advisors, can be super helpful.
2 mistakes that I see that sometimes founders do that are mistakes in my opinion. The first one is targeting the Israeli market before going to US. I mean, we tried it with the first startup and it didn't do well. We didn't gain any advantage. We should have just go straight to US. And another mistake is trying to create a US-based go-to-market from Israel by the Israeli people. I strongly suggest to hire US people to do to build the go-to-market in US.
All right, so I think this is going to be my last question. Where do you see the Israeli cybersecurity ecosystem over the next 3 to 5 years? And what advice would you give to founders who are building their companies these days?
So actually, I think that if we are putting aside the war and its effect, I think that the Israeli ecosystem is very, very strong. I think that we have so much advantage to build a cybersecurity company from Israel, because there is so much experience, so much money, so much the perception on the Israeli startup is extremely good. So I think that we should diverse to other category in general for the Israeli economy, but I think that I believe that the cybersecurity scene is still going to be very strong in the next 5 years.
Look, we are all part of that industry, and a strong part also in our portfolios, in our involvement. We all have ex-employees that want to also play in this game and get the opportunity to fulfill their dreams as startup entrepreneurs. I've supported 3 of my ex-employees in their individual companies. Both have just finished raising an A round, so that's a huge sense of accomplishment when you see that the ecosystem is being built. And I know that there are some ex-teams that are coming from Signia and some other companies that have done well and building a heritage. We're going to have Talon spawn some startups in the future as well. So we are not in a position to stop this party. We are in a position to support it. I think it will. I think even given the war, we have international tier 1 VCs that are managing tens of billions of dollars that are now decided to spend the summer in Israel. There are 2 Sequoia partners that are living in Israel for the summer and showing their support. We now have a joint deal with a new tier 1 global that has never done a seed in Israel and are now leading a seed round in Israel. a lot of the industry that we've been supporting for the last 15 years is showing their thanks and their appreciation, and essentially they're not doing it just because of Zionism. They're doing it because of they believe in the economic value and the importance of even Israel to Silicon Valley. You know, maybe Silicon Valley would definitely look differently if it wasn't for the Israelis and the Israeli companies that spend a lot of energy and time there. So, you know, just find something with passion, and we'll help you find the right way to execute around it.
Yeah, I just very much agree that we are at the best place in the world to found a cybersecurity startup, and the war will eventually end. So if you have a passion for it, just do it.
All right, sounds like a great way to wrap up this panel. So I want to thank you, Dima, Ran, Ohad, and Zohar for your time today, and also for your continued involvement and support in our industry. You take a very part of it, so I think we all thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.